X-Men. Get it!
Welcome to Battle of the Atom. This is your weekly X-Men podcast where I, Zach Jenkins, and my co-host Adam Reck talk about three X-Men stories, and we determine what's the best and what's the worst. Adam, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. I'm just chilling in my hologram-filled skyscraper that I own all by myself for no real reason, and it makes me perfectly qualified to talk about our stories today, Zach.
That's amazing. if you haven't guessed from that one weird thing, we're talking about Life-Death. Life-Death is the theme for this episode. And do you know why that's the theme, Adam?
This was a request, correct?
It was. This is a Patreon request from Trent Seeley, who is one of our supporters on Patreon and someone we talk about comics with on the Twitter, which is...
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Thank you, Adam, for expressing my thank you to Trent.
Thanks, Trent.
So we've got a whole Life-Death themed episode bespoke created around that suggestion. And just for everyone else, if you would like to have an entire episode crafted to your specifications based on something that you like, you know what you can do? You can go over to patreon.com, donate $2 just like Trent did, and we'll talk about some comics for you. It'll be good.
Nice.
So
yeah. And these are good comics too. So this is a great recommendation.
Like this is pretty solid comic books.
When was the last time you read these? Is this something you revisit often?
A while ago. Like I did.
Okay.
I did the usual X-Men fans. I should go through Claremont again. Run. Probably two or three. It was 3 years ago at this point. Yeah.
I actually stumbled on these in floppies recently, so I've read them recently and then just kind of flipped through them again for tonight. But they're really pretty.
The first issue is Uncanny X-Men 186, called Life-Death. This was written by Chris Claremont and a writing credit also to the artist on this, Barry Windsor Smith.
I think that's appropriate.
And he's been a well-liked guy on this list so far.
Yeah, he's awesome.
Yeah. So let's talk about where this happens and when this happens and what happens in it. This is right after Storm loses her mutant abilities. She's gone through the Mohawk phase and she went to help Rogue with something, and Henry Peter Gyrich, the worst guy in the world, shoots her with a anti-mutant gun. And she wakes up in Forge's apartment.
What a jerk.
Look, he's not great. He's bad to the X-Men. He's bad to the Avengers. He's kind of just he is the standard Marvel bureaucrat in a way that someone like Maria Hill.
Maria Hill.
He plays a similar role to what Maria Hill does nowadays, but Maria Hill is nuanced
fun
in a way that he very much is not. He's a...
Yeah, I've actually been rereading Bendis's infamous Iron Man, and the way he writes Maria Hill on that is fantastic.
Bendis writes a good Maria Hill.
I love that idea of sort of global policeman. Yeah.
But no, it's good stuff. So
Gyrich is no Maria Hill.
Right, but Gyrich's actually not that important in the story. What is important is Storm and Forge. So this isn't the first time we see Forge, but this is the first time we really dig into what his deal is, and we only get bits and pieces of it, but it's fascinating. I'll tell you, I was going through this, and every time Storm and Forge have a scene together, this book is on another level. First off, like you said, Barry Windsor Smith's art, gorgeous, very good artist, 10 out of 10, would read it.
Oh yeah.
But I love the dynamic these two have in such a short amount of time. In what, maybe 20 pages of them two, you see them go through a full relationship right there.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of it is just a really very masterfully done character study, because we have Storm just completely distraught about losing her powers, but finding some recognition in Forge because of his prosthetics. And so we get this very instant connection, and then this love-hate relationship that goes forward. So we're going from, romantic kisses to like a wrap up with a punch in the face. And both characters are so well defined here. It's done extremely well.
Yeah, like Forge is a character that hasn't always been done right by. And we'll talk about that in one of the later stories we have on here, I'm sure. But this is an excellent portrayal of him. Like, he's super engaging in this. He's a fully developed character. One of the cool things he mentions, and I don't have the page in front of me, but something about being he's Cheyenne, and that's a big part of him, and not just later stories can get into very tropey, very traditional. Hey, look, it's a Native American person kind of things, and that's not great. But in this story here, his heritage is a part of him. It's something that's an intersection between it's intersectional between him being a mutant and him being Cheyenne, him being a veteran. Like, all these different, they all inform this character who gets so developed in such a small amount of time. You get the feeling that he's always been just on the outside of everything, and he's learned to live with that. He's okay. He's fine building this giant glass holographic world around himself, because you know what? He doesn't need the outside world. He's fine being Forge.
Yeah, I've always really liked Forge. My issue with Forge comes when we get into this sort of tropey mystical stuff, that leads to the Texas disappearance of the X-Men before the Aussie
Yeah,
area.
the adversary
I
comes.
really like Forge when he is, yeah, that never really like, I never loved that. And I like it more when Forge's 80s techno guy, like, I think the other character in this story, which is really important, I was joking about it before, is his house.
Yeah.
And the fact that it has the ability to kind of conjure these visions and these holographic images of what their backstories might be, or what's going on inside their heads, and it really makes for a great visual cue for what the relationship is between the two of them, and then what's happening inside their heads as well.
Yeah, it's great. Windsor Smith does a ton of good stuff using that location to inform the rest of the story. It's a masterful
Yeah.
job in using that setting. Can I tell you the downside of this issue?
I think you're probably about to say what I was going to say, which is that there's a little bit of an aside in this issue. Was that what you were going to talk about?
I was going to talk about Rogue and Val Cooper and the Dire Wraiths, and how little I care about any of that. It's just, look,
and how it takes up a quarter of the page count.
Yeah,
almost. It's a considerable part of this issue.
I'm not a guy who's read Rom Space Knight because, well, Rom Space Knight is pretty impossible to read at this point in my life, unless I want to buy every issue in a long box, which I've considered just for the just because it's so difficult to get. But
yeah, that's such an interesting, weird crossover, right?
Yeah. And the Rogue stuff is just not as engaging. Val Cooper, I mean, it's interesting to see early Val Cooper here, but she's not as developed as she'll be later in comics history. I don't know. It's that part doesn't work. If this was a standard size book, I think it would hurt it a lot more than it does. But every time it switches away from Forge and Storm and onto the Rogue stuff, I lose interest, and I'm like, okay, let's get back to the good stuff here. Let's get to the meat.
Well, and I had forgotten that this is 40 pages long. So this, does have almost like a double-sized format to it, and it allows them to go off on that side. And honestly, it wouldn't be Claremont if he didn't have some sort of plot, B plot going on in the backgrounds. But it certainly doesn't need it. It detracts from it. But I think we can also kind of overlook that little cameo aside and concentrate on the central story, which is just very, very amazing character work. It's beautiful art, and there's a reason that it's a classic that kind of stands out on its own.
Where do you think
All right.
where do you think this thing goes on our master list? Now, for everyone listening at home, number 1 on our master list right now is Days of Future Past. Number 45 is X-Men Phoenix Legacy of Fire, edited by C.B. Cebulski. It's a bad comic, and with recent revelations as of editing today, or as of recording today, it's less comfortable than it previously was, and it was already really uncomfortable.
That is an interesting observation. Yes. In terms of ranking Life Death, honestly, when I was started thinking about how I wanted to rank Life Death, I started to gravitate right back to the other Barry Windsor Smith issue that we had done already, which was Wounded Wolf. I think Life Death it holds its own as part of a classic in the Claremont era, and I think it could be top 10 material.
I think it's very good. I went right to Wounded Wolf because they're similar stories. They're character studies on, for the most part, a single character, Wolverine for Wounded Wolf and Storm for Life Death. I struggle with this one a bit just because it does have the fluff in it where Wounded Wolf is a lot more economical. I would personally say it's below that. I think it's definitely better than the Wolverine and the X-Men 17 one with Dupe. I'm trying to think, where do you think it falls between Generation X Volume 1, number 1 through 3?
I think this is better. I love Generation X 1 to 3. I'm a huge Pachalo fan, but I think Barry Windsor Smith knocks it out of the park here. I think this is a really, really amazing interaction between these two characters. So I don't know. I was kind of looking maybe at number 10.
I think that's fair. I'm good with that. Right below Wounded Wolf and right above Generation X numbers 1, 2, and 3, we have Uncanny X-Men 186 Life Death. Now, guess what we're going to talk about, Adam?
I can't imagine. Could we possibly be talking about the sequel, Life Death 2?
Life Death 2 Electric Boogaloo. Yes. It's actually Life Death from the Heart of Darkness, but okay, I like Electric Boogaloo better because it's storm and electricity, and when you explain jokes, they're actually funnier. Did you know that, Adam?
Well, that's what all the stand-ups do. I had forgotten what Life Death 2 was about. I realized that I was just talking about how I bought these in floppies, but for whatever reason, I had thought that Life Death 2 involved Forge, and it doesn't. It's Storm. Well, we should note that this is Uncanny X-Men 198. It's Claremont and Windsor Smith again.
Barry Windsor Smith does everything but the letters on this one, where in the last one someone else was doing the colors, and I just closed out that tab, so I do forget.
Terry Austin did the inks on that one too, which is we should probably just make a quick note, because Terry Austin did some of the Asgardian Wars stuff. That guy kills
Terry
it.
Austin,
like, what a great inker.
Start flipping through a lot of 80s comics that you like. Terry Austin inked a lot of them.
There. Yeah. So yeah, Life Death is Storm returning to Kenya. It's to an ambiguous
it's a village.
Group of people at a village. We're not getting too specific. Claremont, I don't know that is what he's necessarily interested in here. We get a little bit of life, and we get a little bit of death, and it again gets to sort of prop Storm back up and get her to find her base, and find what she's made of again, which seems to be the ongoing
Storm
story.
At this time, she had actually left the X-Men temporarily to go just kind of find herself after she had lost her powers and all that. She goes back home to Kenya.
Mm-hmm.
She got shot in the head. A bullet grazed her skull, but it didn't go well for her. Like, still, bullets hurt. Even if they don't kill you, bullets aren't great things. Yeah. So she has a bit of a vision of the X-Men, and she has to decide for herself whether she lives or whether she will die. And Storm, the goddess, chooses life. which works. That's what Storm would do. I don't think anyone disagrees with that.
Yeah.
And she finds a pregnant woman, goes back to their village and helps this woman give birth, which is done in a very touching way. One of the interesting things
Mm-hmm.
that Barry Windsor Smith does in this issue is he uses nudity in a way that is not sexualized, which comics struggle with. Because there's a lot of Storm, walking around the African Serengeti with, limited clothing, but it's always
Mm-hmm.
done in a way to show her as, this natural person, that she's part of this. When she brings someone in, it's to show, this is, at the core, we're cutting away all of the costumes, everything. This is survival, this is life, and this is death. And it's a very interesting choice, and
Mm-hmm.
a lesser artist couldn't pull it off, but Barry Windsor Smith does it very admirably.
Yeah, I mean, it helps that Barry Windsor Smith can draw these strong, warrior women, and apply that to what the way in which he draws Storm and the other characters in this book. One of the things that I was thinking about as I was reading this is Claremont's sort of, I don't know if sketchy is the right word, but it's always interesting to see how Claremont works a variety of different cultures into X-Men stories without necessarily doing his homework. We've had a lot of criticism over the years of his versions of certain accents, and what is, we were just talking about Forge's Cheyenne history and whether that was ever really done thoughtfully. This issue, I thought, while it keeps the actual cultural aspects that could have been a little bit more accurate kind of on the periphery, it still does such a really great job of focusing in on the character, and the group of people that she encounters, that it doesn't bother me. I still think this is a really, really strong story. But I don't think it has necessarily, it's a much more visual story for me as a reading experience, as opposed to Life Death, which is a much more character interaction between, it's two strong characters back and forth. This is more just about a spirit journey for Storm. I don't know, what's your take on this one?
So there's a couple of things to unpack there. The first one, you mentioned his handling of Africa as a culture, and part of the issue is that line of Africa as a culture. Well, Africa is a continent with a lot of different vibrant cultures inside of it. Now he does, set this in Kenya. It more closely aligns with that, to the best of my knowledge, and I am not an Africa expert. I'll say that right up. But it seems to treat it with respect. It seems to treat it with, he doesn't say, I'm the smart white guy, I know all the answers. In fact, he straight up refutes that in this story. All these relief workers come to this village and have given them tools and given them equipment and all this stuff to try and turn an arid desert into something that can sustain more life and help them out. And it's a big part of the story where the elder of the tribe, whose name is Manjari, Mjnari, and I'm not even, it's what it is. He says, hey, look, they were trying to help, I get that, but they don't understand what we really need. And that's fascinating to me, because I actually just listened to something that Planet Money podcast that NPR puts out did about relief workers in South Sudan, who they realized that, sending straight up money wasn't really what was needed there, because they hadn't understood what the culture was yet. What they needed were cows, because cows had become a de facto currency. And it was interesting to see that kind of play out in Claremont's awareness of this back there, and saying, hey, maybe what we think are all the answers aren't the right answers, and maybe we should listen to some people on what they actually need. Yes. So I think all that's good. I think there's stuff that could probably be handled better, but I think Claremont, especially in 1985, does about as good of a job as he can. His heart is definitely in the right place, even if there's a few missteps here and there. I do agree with you that this is a bit more of a visual story, but I think this works better as a character piece for Storm, where Life Death 1, Storm informs, you learn a bit more about Forge than you do Storm. You still get a good amount of stuff with Storm in that, But I think that's a bit more of a, to the stat, it's a bit more a play of those two against each other, where this is Storm taking all of those parts of her life that are, they run counter to each other. Storm is a woman of contradictions. She is the thief and the goddess. She is the rebel and the leader. Like, that is Storm in a nutshell. And this is one of the few stories to be able to pull all those threads together, which is, that's like a mammoth task in comics. I don't know if there's anyone in over a decade who's been able to do that incredibly well. Storm's just a hard character to write well. And yeah, I like this a lot, personally.
Yeah, I do too, especially even just from a visual standpoint. The scene where the elder member of the tribe passes away is just so visually stunning. Barry Windsor Smith and his use of color here, it's astonishing what he's capable to do in the last couple pages of this story. I do like that this brings Storm back to, the very beginning of what her story was. And we'll see that again in the next thing that we talk about. But this does it, I think, extremely, extremely well. So how does this stack up for you against Life Death 1? And so where would you rank it?
I think you like the first Life Death better, and I think I like the second Life Death better. Am I right?
Well, they're both excellent. So, it's not necessarily that there's a preference. I think it's just they're kind of equal in a lot of ways. They have different strengths that both make them incredible.
And I would say, of the Barry Windsor Smith stories we have, I still think Wounded Wolf is probably better than Life Death 2, just because Wounded Wolf is real friggin' good. Like, that's the problem with these kind of lists. They start to become stacked at the top.
Yeah. Well, and that's good. That means that there's lots of awesome stuff. I think I'm really comfortable if you want to put Wounded Wolf, Life Death 2 in between Wounded Wolf and Life Death 1. Just for the sheer fact that I think we're acknowledging that Life Death 2 is such a strong individual character study of Storm, whereas Life Death 1, I agree, does focus more on Storm identifying with Forge's backstory. So it's much more of a Forge story.
Life Death 2 also doesn't have the freaking dire wraiths. So look, it's going to rank high for me.
Yeah,
I don't know. Does everyone else hate the dire wraiths?
It's more direct.
Can someone add us and tell me if you hate the dire wraiths too, or this is just a weird X-Men thing that I dislike?
I would like to just put, though, a little positive note on dire wraiths. I think they're dumb, and I think that they're redundant because, obviously we already have things like
Brood. And the scrolls. They're Brood scrolls. They're magic Brood scrolls.
Yeah. However, I do think it still points to, I think in the last episode when we did Asgardian Wars, we were talking about editorial freedoms and, the ability to do some really bizarre stuff. I do think that there is something absolutely awesome about the fact that here we have, this weird property that Marvel owns, that what was ROM originally? Is it a toy? It's a toy, was fun. Right?
My dad was staying with us for a little bit last summer whenever IDW was redoing their ROM line, because they have the license for it.
Oh yeah.
And they were giving out one for Free Comic Book Day, and I just came back and he was sitting in the living room. I was like, oh yeah, I got all this cool stuff. And he sees, wait, ROM Space? That was a toy I couldn't have when I was a kid. And I was like, what? He got real into it for a good evening.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a toy that Hasbro would put out.
Well, and I don't know if I've ever shared this because I don't think we've really gotten into like how I got into comics, but I got into comics because of Marvel's Transformers series. That was my gateway into comic books in general. And I really do think it's awesome that in the 80s, there was the potential for crossover between these, toy licensed properties and the All-Stars. Like they made a point of putting... Go ahead.
Was the Marvel Transformers set in the 616? Because I know ROM was, I know Godzilla was. Transformers were in the 616. Okay, that's amazing.
Yeah. It is, and they make a really direct point of having Spider-Man in issue 3, I think, to make that very clear. Which, you know, they never exploited that, but the point of why I'm bringing this up is I do think it's cool that Claremont is looking around and seeing what's available and bringing in these random things, even if the thing he brought in is dumb, and we don't like it. I do think that still points to some, you know, something that's really cool that we don't see all that often, you know, in current
it's
comics. You know, that whole idea of shared universe is a little bit.
It's the strength of the Marvel
limiting.
universe, and it's great. One aside on that before we get to the next thing, because you're bringing up weird uses of licensed property in Marvel. When we do the story of the founding of X Club, did you know that there is a part where Archangel murders actual Godzilla? Like the Toho Godzilla.
No.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That's not
no,
in
it's
X
in
Club, though, is it?
It's Fractions Uncanny, like 50 whatever. They go recruit a Japanese doctor who was a character in the Godzilla series. And then he talks about this monster that has been chasing him for years and has been his arch nemesis forever and ever. And he's mutated so much since, you know, we used to know each other. And it's Godzilla. Like, they changed his face so he has a Fing Fang Boom face. Great. Like, just the nose because of licensing reasons. But I'm like 99% sure in the canon of Marvel, that's what Marvel's Godzilla became. That's
Godzilla.
Huh. It's not the Godzilla that had a basketball contest with Charles Barkley, though. Those are separate Godzilla continuities. But we digress.
That one's a classic. We never ranked Life Death 2. We said it was
the new number 10 between Wounded Wolf and Life Death. That's what we said, right?
All right. Okay, I'm not sure if we actually said that. So, Life Death 2, Uncanny X-Men 198, new number 10, and Life Death 1 at number 11. And that leads us to our third story of the day, which is not technically Life Death 3, but is pretty much Life Death 3.
Return of the Goddess. This was in the 2015 Storm solo series. This was issue number 3, written by Grave Pak, with pencils by Scott Hepburn and David Ballion, inks by Hepburn and Jordi Tarragona, and colors by Rochelle Rosenberg. So this is interesting. In general, what were your thoughts on the Pak Storm series, Adam?
I liked it. I liked that at that moment in continuity that Storm got a solo focus, and I also liked that it's interesting. It's kind of like what we have going on with the Hopeless's Jean Grey series now, in that each issue seemed to follow up on Storm's relationship, at least for the first couple of issues. Not that the series lasted for very long, but each of them followed up with an important character from Storm's past. I don't know that ultimately, like if you look at the entire series, that it's 100% successful, but the first couple issues I think are pretty cool, and I like this one quite a bit.
I think this was a good series. This particular issue is about Storm returning to the village in Kenya where she was worshipped as a goddess. And oh my gosh. Forge, who's...
Oh, that would make this issue pretty cool, wouldn't it? Cable working on relief.
That's a weird pairing that I actually think would work now that I'm like giving it more than 4 seconds of thought.
Yeah,
Cable and Storm would be a good power
Storm
couple.
And Cable go on relief.
Okay.
I'd like to see. Well, I don't want to see him like have a relationship. I just want to see them team up.
I think they would do the Storm and Wolverine dynamic better because Cable has been worshipped as a god. Cable has been, had the weight of everything on his shoulder, and he is a man of so much contradiction. I don't know. I could see it happening. That's not in this story, though. She has a relationship with Forge. So Forge essentially tricks her coming into this, coming back home to her village, where it's kind of an intersection of Life Death 1 and Life Death 2. It's the Forge relationship and her relationship with Africa, and the relationship of what's best for their African people. It brings up on that thread that Claremont said, hey, all these workers, they came and they brought all this equipment and it worked for a time, but they didn't know what was best for us.
The thing I like about this story is that it expands on that particular concept. I'm always interested and kind of fascinated that issues of the environment, issues of global warming, socioeconomic issues that, really affect people's lives are not talked about more in comics. I think we saw a little bit of this again in G. Willow Wilson's quick run on adjectiveless X-Men. But I like when there are, stories like this, right?
It's interesting. I don't think Pac has as strong of a grip on Storm in this issue as like Claremont has in Life Death, for sure. Some of it feels a little heavy-handed here. Like Storm pretty much, like, she straight up tells Forge, no, you don't know what's good for these people. You get a year to try and figure that out. It's a weird wrap up to this story, I'd say.
Yeah, the conclusion of it is basically that Forge is saying that he can fix the tech that's involved here in a matter of days or weeks. And Storm is essentially asking him, and he's saying that he wants to be friends. He's not indicating that he's interested in pursuing her romantically. But her response is essentially, well, you got to prove yourself to me, so stay here for a year. And it's, I understand why, Pac wrote that as the conclusion, to really show that Forge is dedicated to the cause, that he brought Storm there and took her out of her daily life to deal with. But, it's also not necessarily, if we're being frank, the best utilization of Forge's powers. If Forge has the ability to fix this equipment in a couple of weeks, he could go do it for somebody else in a couple of weeks too. So, it ends on a weird note. But I just wish there were more stories in contemporary comics about issues like this. I like that they explore the dynamics of the situation.
I think it's a situation of, why can't Reed Richards cure cancer? Because it wouldn't be the Marvel universe.
Yeah.
Why did the 9/11 issue of Spider-Man have to happen, even though in canon 9/11's been destroyed or attacked several times? Because the Marvel universe is supposed to be the universe outside your window. So Forge can't go and cure famine in Africa, even though from everything we've seen from Forge, he should be competent enough to be able to do that. And, everything we know from Reed Richards, he doesn't want to turn everyone into dinosaurs, so he should be able to cure cancer pretty easily and not get distracted.
And we talked about this when we covered Heroes for Hope. The idea of famine being a villain that they really didn't know how to handle. I don't necessarily need the superheroes to go out and magically fix these. I just think it makes for interesting subject material, and I'm glad that it was worked into this story. And is it the same as Life, Death 1 and 2? No. Even if you had brought Barry Windsor Smith back for this issue, it's not the same.
And unlike the last one, we haven't talked a lot about the art here, just because the art here is very, it is the Toyota Corolla of comic book art. It's perfectly fine. There is nothing wrong with it. I have no real issues. It is good old steady comic book art that's not going to surprise anyone. It's fine. It's solid. It's just not great. It's not amazing.
I like the art. I think it's well done. I think the storytelling is really good. This is the kind of art that I think is better than some of the individual issues that we've seen of X-Men over the last couple of years. I think it's pretty solid.
It's exactly solid.
However, it's unfair to put anybody up against,
but that's the job
Barry
of this
Windsor-Smith,
podcast, Adam.
who is obviously
That's
a
what we're
master.
here for, is to put people up against Barry Windsor-Smith.
Yeah.
So we're in agreement that this ranks lower than Life Deaths. Now, oddly comparable, Heroes for Hope, higher than that, right? Heroes for Hope's at 43.
How far down did we go? Oh, that's...
I'm telling you, it's better than Heroes for Hope.
I mean, I think the other thing...
Because Heroes for Hope is bad.
No. It definitely is. I was looking more towards like maybe in between No More Humans and the X-Men Volume 2 Mojo story. I mean, because it's not that this is bad by any stretch of the imagination. Like, it's fine. It does cool things that I like. It just, I don't know how much real meaning it has. However,
I was just going to say, my thoughts on it are, it's an issue that I forgot existed until you mentioned doing it for this episode. I know I read it when it hit Unlimited. I wasn't picking up Storm and floppies. I was catching that on that 6-month delay. But I read it and I said, "Oh, this is good. This is fine." And I completely forgot about it. And there's some stuff on this list, like above that is Deadly Genesis or Fatal Attractions. And like, I'm remembering those. It doesn't matter if it was good or bad. Like, those did something that stuck with me. And there's parts of those that I don't mind. Now, I would say I think it's better than Deadly Genesis because I don't dislike this story. I dislike Deadly Genesis. We've made that very clear that there is a gap in our opinions.
And would we say that this is more memorable than the first issue of Silver Age?
Would you rather reread X-Men #1 or Storm 3? I would rather reread X-Men #1.
I think so too. So maybe it's in between X-Men Volume 1, #1 and Deadly Genesis.
The new number 39 on this list, not an amazing showing, but yeah, not the worst in the world. Storm Volume 3, number 3. We're just gonna call it Life Death 3. And that'll do it for this episode. That was 3 interesting ones. Had some good stuff. Oh, one last thing. The best part of Life Death 3, I'll tell you, there was a variant cover that I've just sent you the link by Stephanie Hans. Take a look at it. It's freaking gorgeous.
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
This is actually...
It's beautiful.
This is becoming one of my favorite Storm pictures. I don't know why. I think it gets a lot about Storm that I like. That's great.
Yeah, it's really nice.
Anyway, go pull that up on your phone right now, all of you listeners. We'll wait. And we're back. So, this has been Battle of the Atom. Everything Battle of the Atom comes from our great supporters on Patreon, just like Trent. Thank you again, Trent. If you would like to join their ranks, go on to patreon.com/XavierFiles, and you can donate whatever you want. If you can't support monetarily, I know I don't support everything I listen to monetarily, then go on over to your local podcast getting thing and leave us a rating or review. It really helps people find us, helps us move on up in the podcast ranking, so we could definitely officially be the number 2 X-Men podcast in the world.
What?
We're coming for Jay and Miles. They've gotta be watching.
Oh, please.
But
we're just doing our thing.
We're getting there.
No one's pretending that we're them.
Okay, yeah, no one. I was thinking of pretending, but then I decided not to. But if you want to see me pretend to be Jay and Miles or do kind of anything else, you can go to XavierFiles.com. That's where I have weekly articles about X-Men. As this goes up, I don't know which one I will have been written because this is actually being recorded in the very far past. We haven't even recorded the episode you heard last week yet. So... yeah, I don't know what it is. It's going to be good, though. It'll be actually number 99, and I'm getting ramped up for number 100. Cool. That's going to be a big
anniversary.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, I like that. Events.
Yeah, this is breaking into the triple digits. I didn't think that was happening. You can also go to Twitter at Xavier Files. Follow me. That's where you get all of the updates about the show and cool stuff happening there. Adam, Where can people find you online?
You guys can follow me on Twitter at Arthur Stacy. You can also just take a look at my art at adamrec.tumblr.com. I am working to get a big cartel store open with hopefully at the beginning of December. We're recording this before the beginning of December, but hopefully we'll be able to have pre-orders because I'm going to do, with any luck, a print edition of Bish and Jube's Age of Strife with some fan art inside. And we'll do pre-orders through Big Cartel. And then hopefully I can get those out to everybody before the holiday so that, you can have them under your Christmas tree.
Yep. It's going to be good. I'm looking forward to it. I don't know if I'll be the first one just because I don't know when I'm going to see it, but I'm getting one ordered.
Well, thank you,
so the last thing, I like Bish and Jubes. I do. The last thing that I do want to mention, tonight, actually, as we write or as we talk about this, we're not writing anything. We're just saying words out of our mouth holes. There is a new podcast that has been launched by a friend of the show. It is called The Young Ones, and it is all about teen superheroes. It literally has gone up while we've been recording this, so I have not gotten a chance to listen to it yet. But Charlie and Charlie's friend, whose name I forget, I'm very excited to listen to it, and all of you should listen to it too. I think that covers everything, right?
Yeah, I think so. Good plug.
Has this been Battle of the Atom?
It has been. And what do we hope?
Do we hope they survive the experience?
We do.
Great. See you next week, guys.
Get it!